Yeah, well, when you have a leader like Mathieu van der Poel, who's clearly the outright favorite, you're going to see everyone step up.
It was one of those moments where guys are on the ground and we're kind of waiting for them to even get up, which is sobering and shocking and just hard to watch on a human level, not to mention a sporting level.
Pogacar is probably going to go down as the greatest bike racer of all time.
And there's so much tradition and history steeped in there, but to have an American, 18 years old, make it to the velodrome, even if he was a minute outside the time cut, that's huge.
Now, when it comes to Jonas Vingegaard, I don't know. It's like we said, you have to show up ready. You have to show up healthy. I think he has time, but it's going to be tough to come back from.
Welcome back to this edition of Beyond the Podium. I'm Brent Bookwalter. I'm happy to be back here with my pal Tejay Van Garderen. We got a big show today, tons of action coming at us from the cycling world the past week or so. I knew this show was coming, and I got to say, even last week back to Tour of the Basque Country, I was thinking, whoa, we got a lot to talk about. And then yesterday, the Van der Poel dominance in Paris Roubaix. We're definitely going to have to get into that. We also are going to touch on Lotto Kopecky, really exciting women's edition of Paris Roubaix, another world champion, 2 world champions winning this year's edition of Paris Roubaix. And then going back to the Tour of the Basque Country, insanity, those crazy crashes, cleaning out the entire list of the GC favorites in that race. We're also going to let Tejay chime in, clarify some of those comments from the past show about Tadej Pogacar. I wasn't even here for that, so I'm not going to get too close and into that, but we will let Tejay chime in. And then we're going to look ahead. We're going to look forward to next weekend's big rendezvous of the Pro Peloton, the Amstel Gold Race. So that's what we have coming up in today's episode of Beyond the Podium. Before we get into that, Tejay, it's great to see you again. Tell us how you're doing, where you're at, and what's up. And I think I can see just out of the corner there, you brought your friend that nice little golden lion from your career that you're flexing on us there. So it's good to see you're not alone there, and you're in a pretty hospital environment from the looks of it.
Yeah, no, just coming at you from Mallorca still. Head to Tour of the Alps next week. And just figured I'd have this guy with me, a little company for the podcast, give you some moral support. Well, he's 9 years old now. This guy is 9 years old.
Yeah. What was that, a Dauphiné?
Yeah, it was Dauphiné 2015. Had the yellow jersey for a couple of days. Bagged myself a couple of ones of these.
Nice. Well, hopefully you won't need to crack one of those bottles of wine open during this episode. But we'll see where it takes us.
Never hurts.
If only we were in person together. So let's get into Roubaix. Yesterday was a big day for every bicycle racing fan. I think I have just so many memories of growing up watching Paris Roubaix. And for me, much of my experience was the same. I tuned it on in the morning. I'm back in the US, just how I grew up watching Paris Roubaix. And I loved having the voice of our buddy Phil Leggett once again making the call. I thought he did a spectacular job. And even more so after I had a couple brief glimpses of doing some play-by-play race commentary last year in the studio during the tour. When I listen to Phil now and I hear him come through and convey the history, convey the stats, the love and passion for it, and the deep history that he has, having called so many Paris-Roubaix, I just loved it. I loved the racing. I loved the coverage. And how did you watch it, Tejay? How did you watch Paris-Roubaix? And tell us about that.
Yeah, well, here in Mallorca, it's only going to come in on Spanish Eurosport, so I catch every about second word, or probably less than that, actually. So I just basically turn the volume down and watch the images, so I don't get the old legendary Phil Liggett voice coming through the screen. But when I watched it, you know how we all watch Roubaix, we kind of turn it on like a couple hours into the coverage, and then when I looked at that, I was like, whoa, this race has already exploded and there's like 150K to go. So I had to rewind it and see like what the heck happened here. But it was like, it just seemed like it was just jet fuel, nonstop action from the get-go. So it was a crazy, crazy Roubaix.
Yeah, I was having some PTSD. I was fortunate to do Roubaix once, very, very early in my career when I was young enough and maybe probably dumb enough to actually want to do it and be really excited for it. But yeah, I tuned it on. Same thing, thinking I was going to catch the meat of the action, and then had to do some rewind and some catching up because those guys opened it up early. But it really was exciting the whole time, and arguably you could say the beginning and the middle was even more exciting than the end. But really, really brilliant race to watch. I can't forget to mention, we did check in with Phil. We know some of the folks were kind of critical of him being a little off with the champion, the winner, Mathieu van der Poel. He did at times call him by his dad's name, which is also just, to me, nuts that Phil's been doing this long. He's actually called the race for Mathieu van der Poel's dad, Adrie van der Poel. So yeah, Phil felt bad about that, but you got to hand it to him. I mean, he's the only one that's really still in the game and been around that long. So I think very understandable mistake to make. And I'm sorry you missed that, TJ. We got to get you back to the US.
The guys have the same name. The guys have the same name. They have the same style. They've won all the same kinds of races. I mean, like that's an honest mistake. And that just shows just the depth of knowledge. And Adrie van der Poel, Hall of Famer, give him his flowers, and his son's definitely living up to his name. Wow.
Yeah, I think so. When we're talking about the Van der Poels now, I mean, the name is a little, the term is a little cliched these days, but legendary, legends of the cobbles, legends of the classic. I mean, Mathieu van der Poel, he's there now. That win was such a fortified display of dominance. Not just how he rode, but how his team rode. I think that was one of the biggest sort of surprises, if you will, for me, was not to see him attack real early. It wasn't shocking to see him ride into that velodrome solo after his dominance at Tour of Flanders the week before, but to see his team take the bull by the horns and open the race up, as earlier than we've ever seen it before, and whittle that lead group down, was just real dominant. So TJ, tell us what you thought about that from the view of a director. You've been sitting in these races now as a team car. You likely know what the mentality and the communication is from these other teams going up against that. Did any of these other teams even stand a chance, or was it just Van der Poel and his teams for the taking right from the start?
Yeah, well, when you have a leader like Mathieu van der Poel, who's clearly the outright favorite, you're going to see everyone step up. I mean, you've seen that with other teams in the past when they have the leader that everyone has so much confidence in. It just gives you 10, 15 extra watts. I remember a specific example in 2013. I want to say, no. It was 2014, the year that Nibali won the Tour. Chris Froome was the outright favorite, and he crashed out. And Sky was just a dominant team that just they could control everything. But once you cut the head off the snake, they didn't have the best Tour. So it wasn't like any one of those individual riders were the strongest, but their leader, the confidence that they have in him, and just their willingness to put everything into him, just gives them that extra little bit of rocket power, And you saw that with Alpecin clearly with Mathieu van der Poel.
For sure. Yeah, they, like we used to talk about when we were teammates, and things are going well. They've got that winning swagger. They've got that winning confidence. And they're really the kings of the classics so far. They're like so many other these dominant classics teams that we've seen in years past. They clearly are the team to beat. And it's important to note that it is a team still. We see Van der Poel ride in that dominant solo style to the finish line, but it really was set up by his teammates. And a big effort. Those guys in their own rights are all classics hitters and super skilled bike handlers. And at Roubaix, we often talk about you got to have luck on your side. Like you never know, it's the cobbles, but they clearly did have some good luck also. But they also, like we see time and time again, make their own luck riding the front where they are in the utmost control and really leaving nothing to chance.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Jasper Philipsen even got second. Like the team went 1-2. That's like something you saw from old school Mapai back in the day.
Yeah, the 1, 2, 3 for Domo. Yeah. Those are the days. It is interesting to think, though, we were missing Wout van Aert. Like, we had no Dylan van Baarle. We saw the Trek team, Mads Pedersen, arguably, the greatest challenger to Van der Poel and his team. But, even they had that little bit of a chink in their armor. Mads probably feeling better from his crash he had a couple weeks ago, but obviously he lost some momentum there. His teammate Jasper Philipsen, who clearly we would expect him to factor in too. How much different would this race have been with Wout van Aert, his team firing on all cylinders? Dylan van Baarle, former winner of Paris Roubaix, also there. If everything had been perfect for these competitors, would Van der Poel have still walked away from it like this?
I think so. And, that's what everyone says. Like, you watch all sports, like you get to the Super Bowl, you get to the NBA finals, like you got to show up healthy. I mean, nobody's firing on all cylinders. They've had to race through cobbles. They've had to race through the wet Paris-Nice and the Tour of Flanders and blah, blah, blah. So sometimes just getting to the start healthy is half the battle. And, Alpecin did that perfectly. Van der Poel did that perfectly. And, what else can you do?
Yeah. Perfection. There's such a miraculous combination of timing, preparation, everything coming together, but really a masterclass by Alpecin, Van der Poel, Philipsen, and that team. We got to mention, it was a blazing fast Paris Roubaix. Again, it was the third year in a row they broke the record for fastest speed. I got to say, I'm feeling pretty good about being retired and not being there, because, just looking at these guys' bikes, we used to ride, when I did Paris Roubaix, we were riding these comfy, cushy box section rims and big tires and triple wrapping our bars. And no one was worried about aerodynamics. It was just about not flatting, surviving the cobbles. And now these guys are fully laid out. They got their narrow handlebars, they're leaned over, their deep dish wheels, their aero frames, and they're flying record speeds on and on again. So I just keep wondering, how much longer can this go on? In 5 years from now, are they going to finish Roubaix with a 50-kilometer average or what? It's nuts.
It seems to be headed in that direction. I don't know. It's at a certain point, you think that they're going to figure everything out and it's just going to be like a bike's a bike and they're all fast, but I don't know. They're still finding ways to push the boundaries, not just with the bike, but with the nutrition, with the training, with everything's just getting faster. I mean, I remember I was joking a couple of weeks ago about when was it? It was Catalonia, the Voltaire 2000. I looked at Tadej's time compared to my winning time from 10 years ago, and it was 8 or 9 minutes faster. And I was like, okay, I was obviously not in the same stratosphere as Tadej Pogacar, but I'm fucking 8 or 9 minutes faster.
A lot.
It's crazy.
That is nuts. The progression is astounding. I'm feeling good on the couch over here. One place they were not going record speeds this year was into the Arenberg. And that was much of the pre-race hype, leading to any bike race these days. There's always something that comes up that's hyped up that we're talking about, gets the journalists going early. And this year, a lot of that was that modification to the entrance to the Forest of Arenberg. And I sort of have mixed feelings on that. I remember being terrified when I did the Roubaix Recon in 2009, way back when I did that race, and thinking, well, one, I don't even know if I'm going to still be in the lead group when we come into the section. But if we are, holy moly, I'm going to be petrified, hanging on tight, because those cobbles are so rough and the speeds at which we flew into there. I think some riders did welcome that change, that hairpin. It was a little bit unorthodox. The visual and the overhead looked a little silly, to just sort of stick a cone in the ground and say, hey guys, go turn around this, and then go into the most historical, decisive section of the race. But I was trying to feel out some of the riders. I talked to an American rider, Joey Roscoff, who is a veteran at this point, but believe it or not, was making his Roubaix debut. And his comment was, I would pretty much rather crash anywhere in the race except Arenberg. So I'm feeling okay about it. So I think that summed it up well. I think that did probably slow it down. It made that section harder. But then in the end, the way they raced, it may not have even mattered. They went into Arenberg with around, I could count like maybe 30 riders. I'm not the best counter these days, but that was a small group. And so maybe it was a little anticlimactic, but, from a director's point of view and being in these team meetings, how these decisions are communicated and hearing the hype amongst the riders on the bus, are we going to start seeing more of these decisions? And what did you think of the hairpin before Arenberg this year?
I made a special note to pay attention for this hairpin, and when it got there, it was like you said, it was kind of much ado about nothing. I was like, okay. They took the hairpin and it had no impact on the race whatsoever. Had they been going in there with 160 guys, who knows? But if you're not in the top 20, you're going to hit those cobbles at such a slow speed that it's just going to accordion, and it's just going to it's going to break it, which we didn't get to see that because the group was already so small to begin with. But I almost think that would make the fight bigger. Now, full disclosure, I've never raced Roubaix. I've only raced like the cobblestones and the Tour de France. So, but in my heart, I'm still a traditionalist. I'm like, we have the Arenberg Forest. It's always been like a crazy fight into there. Everyone loves watching it. The riders get super hyped doing it. I don't feel the need. It was like I was talking about with San Remo, like, let's keep it 300K. Like, even if it's boring for those extra 40K, I like their tradition.
I feel you. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I think, I'm going to have mercy on the riders and say, yeah, I liked it. Enjoy that hairpin and slow speed, guys. So it's good. It's good. We got a bit of contrast there. You're saying bring back the full throttle Arenberg entrance. We'll see what they do next year. We got to mention one particular rider who had no frame of reference on what the Arenberg was like before was American Andrew AJ August, the youngest rider in the race. I think he was the second youngest to ever ride Roubaix. The kid is like 18 years old and he's at Roubaix. He makes it to the finish. He gets to the velodrome. He is outside the time limit, which we have to mention about this race too. And you always see an uncharacteristically large amount of OTLs outside the time limit at Paris Roubaix because it is a race where so many riders just want to get to that velodrome. They want to go in those dingy, stinky showers where all the past winners' names are. And there's so much tradition and history steeped in there. But to have an American 18 years old make it to the velodrome, even if he was a minute outside the time cut, that's huge. What do you know about Andrew AJ August? Because I'll admit, I had heard he won some junior titles, I think, the past year or two back here in the U.S. But to see him pop up at Paris Roubaix with Team Ineos, I'm thinking, whoa, who is this kid?
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times. Great kid. I had no idea that he was actually that young. But that is super impressive that he's winning a race like Roubaix. Shoot, at 18, Brent, like, what were we doing? We were like in Isegem, getting beers down at the square, like in Els and Noel's house. Like, I don't know, like, where are these kids? They should be having fun, right? Like, they're not. They don't need to be going on those cobbles already. Come on, they had a whole lifetime to be doing that stuff.
I sort of cringe about the kids these days coming up so fast, growing up so fast. Now as a 40-year-old, I can say, oh, kids these days. But this guy, he is, for all practical purposes, he's barely legally an adult. He's 18, the youngest rider in the World Tour. But again, we're on NBC, we're on Peacock. So I think everyone watching needs to know, and let's get hyped about Andrew AJ August. I can't wait to see where he turns up next, and I'm going to give him a follow and check him out. So I think it's another cause for celebration in terms of American cycling fans and what they're doing. And we'll get into some other Americans as we talk about Amstel Gold coming up next week. But before we leave Roubaix, we got to talk about the women. Lotte Kopecky, current world champion, also coming across the finish line at the velodrome, victorious. Another world champions jersey flying across the finish line. I didn't watch as much of the women's race as I did the men's race, but I got to say the women's racing is as exciting as ever. A lot of people are talking about the debate. Should Arenberg be included in the women's race? I say, heck yeah, throw it in there. Like these women are as skilled, as capable. as exciting to watch. They have all the bike tech, all the commitment, all the training. I think, it's not a matter of being capable or skilled enough to do it. Clearly they have all that. So I'd say, I know it's a bit of a logistical thing because they sort of start on the other side, but I think more and more it's going to be exciting if they can start seeing the women on as similar as possible to the courses the men are using.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be doing Yarnberg Forest. And yeah, it was super cool to see a double world champion victory in Paris Roubaix. So hats off to Lotto Kopecky. Obviously, I would have liked to see Alison Jackson from EF do a repeat of and do that little dance that she did again on the velodrome. She's a cool cat, but there's always next year, and we can come back and win it. But hats off to Lotto Kopecky.
Nice. Yeah, I think we all missed those dance moves, but I'm sure we'll see Alison Jackson pop up at some of these other races coming up. All right, before we go to the future, we got to flick back even further than yesterday and last weekend at Paris Roubaix. We got to go back to Tour of the Basque Country. It's Zulia. This race is always one of the early spring climbing rendezvous. I also cringe thinking back to doing this race because what I remember the most is I'd set all these personal best power records and PRs, and I would end up in a gruppetto drop group of like 20 minutes down on the stage. It was just mind-boggling, the climbing speed and the climbing level there. These roads they're always super twisty, up and down, really steep. But at the same time, I'll say a lot of times the pavement is good. It's conducive for fast racing and these really high power, steep grades, high torque, which I would say was going to define the race here again. But I think something else that clearly had an even bigger impact on this race, and that were the crashes. And we had the big crash that took out Remco Evenepoel, Primoz Roglic, and Jonas Vingegaard, but there were also crashes in the days leading up to that, taking out riders. We saw Mikel Landa leave with broken bones after that crash that took out the big three favorites at that race. So, a bit of a disaster at the Tour of the Basque Country in terms of the casualties it claimed from the DNF list. And, I think it still produced a very worthy champion in Juan Ayuso, but it's a shame. It's almost not even the headline. It's almost like it has a little bit of an asterisk because arguably the three strongest guys in the race were taken out ahead of time. So there's a lot to unpack here. We can talk about, where those big three are headed now, how they're going to rehab from their crash. We could talk about the race safety. And then, we can't ignore some of the strong American performances there as well, like Brandon McNulty, 5th overall. So TJ, what was your headline coming out from Tour of the Basque Country and seeing the disastrous crash of Primoz, Remco, and Vingegaard?
I mean, that's just something that you never like to see. It's a huge shame to see all those big name riders crash. But even if you're not a big name rider, if you're in the car, like if I'm directing a race and you hear a crash and you hear EF jersey or whatever, and you go there and you see some of the riders on the ground, it's just a shame. All I can do is hope and pray that all those guys are able to get back as soon as they can. Hopefully they get back to 100%. Hopefully, I know that July is going to be most of their big goals. Hopefully they can line up and be ready to go and firing all cylinders. But that's a part of the racing that we don't like to see. We like to see good bike racing. And I have no idea why it happened because like you said, Basque Country, they have good roads. They have good pavement. Obviously it rains a bit up there, but you expect to kind of see crashes in Roubaix, crashes in Flanders up north, but though down there, it's a bit more subdued. It's a bit more tactical, less just, bumping elbows. And I've watched that crash a couple of times and I can't figure out, like, it wasn't even a nasty corner. It wasn't a sharp hairpin. I'm like, how did that even happen? And how did it take out so many people? I guess all that's irrelevant. Let's just hope everyone has a speedy recovery.
Yeah, it was one of those hard crashes to watch because you're not just thinking, oh, look, we lose this guy out of the race or he's out of contention in this particular race. But it was one of those moments where guys are on the ground and we're kind of waiting for them to even get up, which is sobering and shocking and just, hard to watch on a human level, not to mention a sporting level. Just disappointing on all ends. And a little bit what I heard about the reason for that crash and was it was one of these places, TJ, and you'll remember these from racing too, where the trees on the side of the road had actually grown roots under the road and sort of buckled up some of that otherwise usually smooth pavement in the Basque Country. So you're talking about, no contrast, no major even cracks or broken pavement, but you come into that at 60, 70 kilometers an hour and, it's enough to skip a wheel and that's it. And it all goes bad fast. And it's an example of no one's immune to this danger. We talk about guys, the stress of needing to ride in front and stay in front to be safe and ride good position. But even the best riders in the world in the best position are not safe and immune to a disastrous crash if a situation like this arises where the pavement is actually broken. And, looking at that stage profile, it's a little disappointing. It wasn't like there were 40 or even 14 key descents in this stage. This was one of them. So, again, going back to a place I'm passionate about where my heart lies still with rider safety. I put a fair bit of effort towards rider safety in my career and fighting for that. It's disappointing still that there's not a force that goes through and marks these rare places. That is an atypical situation. If you have roots coming under the road that's breaking pavement, that does need to be flagged, signaled, marked. We saw that at Tour of the Basque Country. One of the years I did it, there was a bollard in the finishing stretch, and Pete Stetina smashed his knee into it and blew his leg apart. Had a nearly life-altering and definitely career-threatening and compromising injury. So I go back to a place that it really is disappointment still. I know that every obstacle cannot be flagged. We can't bubble wrap every dangerous part, but seeing how the speeds are going faster and faster and faster, there needs to be a critical eye that is ahead of the race, that's knowledgeable on profile, terrain, road surface, and is doing every best effort to flag those out. So, without talking to a full complement of Tour of the Basque Country riders, we don't know if it really was a freak place and if those precautions were otherwise taken elsewhere. But I still come back to disappointment. And now time will tell if these guys can come back for their big appointments later this year. 3 of our Tour de France contenders and what was going to make this race the most exciting July we've seen in a while now kind of hangs in the balance. And I think, in terms of you talk about a broken collarbone, I think you can come back from that. I know you've come back from collarbones, TJ, I have as well. The year Cadel Evans won the Tour de France in 2011. I broke my collarbone at the Volta Catalunya in March, and I was right on the limit to hit peak form in July. Granted, I'm working with a lot of different circumstances than Vingegaard is. So, these guys are going to have every modern Marvel medical advantage given to them as possible, but it's really going to make for an interesting storyline heading into July because the otherwise outright favorite Jonas Vingegaard, now we're talking about him the same way we were talking about Tadej Pogacar last year, in that he has this injury, he's been suffering, he's been rehabbing. How has his preparation been affected? So, I guess time will tell. But TJ, do you have any thoughts about if Jonas Vingegaard, as a champion, as a legend of the sport, a 2-time Tour de France winner already, is this going to be his sort of like marking and calling of coming through adversity and coming back to defend his Tour title? Or do you think he's really sweating it now and we're not going to see the same Jonas come to July?
Yeah, well, there was a lot to what you just said there, but clearly rider safety needs to be in consideration. You're not going to ever be able to take out all the crashes from the sport. The crashes are going to happen. And like we touched on earlier when we were talking about Roubaix, the bikes are getting faster, the equipment's getting faster, the helmets, the suits, the training, the tires, everything's getting faster. So before you could be a good bike handler, but you're on 5K an hour slower, you could see something. So I don't know, like maybe that has something to do with it. Before I touch on Jonas Vingegaard, I do want to give Juan Ayuso his flowers, because even though a lot of those guys crashed out of the race, he still had to line up. He still had to win it on that tough parkour. He had to stay safe, which was easier said than done, clearly, at that race. And let's not forget, I talked about this before. I know he's American. He probably doesn't know it yet. I know that it says Spain next to his name, but I know I've spoken to him. He still is an American. So I root for him. I'm a big fan of his. So let's before we move on to that, just recognize that he did win one of the hardest 1 week races on the calendar. And it was not an easy victory, especially against a quality rider like Matheus Skelmos, who has really blossomed into a champion himself. Now, when it comes to Jonas Vingegaard, I don't know. It's like we said, you have to show up ready. You have to show up healthy. I think he has time, but it's going to be tough to come back from. Only time to tell. And like this is one of those things where it's like Michael Jordan had the flu game that he had to go through. If you want to be that dude, sometimes it takes like getting over that hump. And I would never wish a crash on anyone to have to get over that hump, but it could add to his legend. And I don't know. We'll see. I mean, right now, I got to say, I'm tipping towards Pogacar come July at this moment in time, and I think the crash might have a little something to do with that.
Yeah, so much uncertainty there now. I think not quite as uncertain as your Spanish internet, which we still have to excuse ourselves for. little patchy over there on the other side of the pond, TJ. But yeah, I think that's really well said. Yeah, it is going to be tough. Yeah, we have to wait and see. There's all this uncertainty also with Pogacar though, because he's still set to do the Giro. So we've had a pretty tumultuous spring through these classics with all sorts of stuff. Wout van Aert losing it. Vingegaard now, Remco, Roglic. Like, we got to remember, Pogacar is going to try to do 21 days of consecutive racing in May in Italy in crazy weather, snow-topped mountains. So, I mean, yeah, that's another, like, Pogacar's got to come through the Giro healthy also. So we're really setting it up. As it stands now, the first week in April, I'd say we have one of the most, we're really, the stage is set for one of the most exciting, uncertain lead ups to the tour ever. So yeah, TJ, just riff on that for a minute. Pogacar's got to get through the Giro also. So we very likely could see this situation where Vingegaard's on the trajectory back up. He's building up, getting ready for the Dauphiné. And then who knows what in the world May and the Giro are going to bring for Pogacar. So are you still sticking him as the favorite, even considering he's got to go through all that?
I guess that depends on how he rides the Giro. I think he can target a couple of stages, win his Giro, and then sort of load manage a little bit in the Giro. And this is actually a good segue into what I was wanting to talk about earlier. So I read a few of your comments. I know I talked about Pogacar a couple of weeks back, and I had a take that he was maybe getting a little too greedy, and I don't think what I said really got delivered in the right way. And I'm not apologizing. I'm not taking anything back. And let me just say, I'm a huge, huge fan of Tadej Pogacar. He's on the Mount Rushmore. And I've been following cycling since 1998. I watched Marco Pantani win the Giro Tour double. I watched Lance Armstrong raced against Contador, raced against Froome. And I got to say, Tadej Pogacar, he's better than all of them. Like, he's the best bike racer I've ever seen. He can win on a multitude of terrains. He can win in a multitude of ways. He's a super fast sprinter, super fast climber, super fast time trialer. I mean, I think he could probably hold his own in a bunch sprint against Jasper Philipsen. Like, whatever. I might have missed.
You're on it.
Anyways. So I'm going to pick on another rider just to kind of paint the scenario of what I was talking about in the Vuelta Catalunya. And this is how I think Tadej Pogacar should probably try to win the Giro. Let's take Bauke Mollema, another rider, great rider who I raced against my whole career. And 8 years ago, he probably would have come to the Catalunya fighting for a podium spot. Now he's a bit older, not quite the same rider. So what is he going to do? If he goes to the base of Vuelta 2000 and says, I'm going to fight, I'm going to empty the tank, I'm going to go as hard as I can and get the highest place I can, what's he going to do? He's probably going to lose around 2.5 to 3 minutes and be somewhere around 20th place. And same thing on Portanet. Like if he goes to the next stage, he would lose another bit of time and probably at the end of the race, finish around 25th to 18th, somewhere around there. That's not something that Bauke wants to do. He's a champion. He's going to want to fight for something more than that. So on stage 2, what he's going to do is he's going to come to the base of Vuelta 2000, click up a couple of gears, and ride easy to the line. Saving energy, losing time, lose 15 minutes, just make time, lose time on purpose. Not everyone gives 100% every day. And he does the same thing on Portanet. So now you're half an hour down. You're no threat to Tadej Pogacar. So now we get to stage 6, which is a perfect day for a breakaway. Bauke Mollema goes up into a breakaway. What Pogacar did on that day was he still put his team on the front and kept them at 1 minute. And so that is where it gets to be like, okay, you don't have to do that. You're winning by a country mile. There's people who are no threat to you. Why are you doing that? And then I saw comments of saying like, oh, if your team's working for you, shouldn't you feel obligated to win? Yes, I agree 100%. However, his team didn't need to work. Now, I have no problem with him winning because in this scenario, Egan Bernal was just off the podium. And I think that Ineos would have maybe put their team on the front because they needed those time bonuses at the finish. They needed to keep those in play. So they didn't want the breakaway to win. They wanted to get that time so they could move on to the podium. And guess what? Ineos pulls back that breakaway. Guess what? Pogacar, the stage wins up for grabs, go win it. No problem with
Still
that.
Wins.
But I think Pogacar, what he's doing is he's spending a lot of energy with himself and with his team winning races that he doesn't necessarily need to win. And this is kind of the beauty of cycling. This is what I fell in love with the sport is like some people, they have the tactic that Mollema had. Like he's going up the road because that's his tactic. That's how he can find success. You know, you have the team leader or the leader of the race's team, they have their tactic. And then you have Ineos, they have their tactic. Most other sports, there's 2 teams, 2 tactics. You have 20 different tactics all mixing together, and you have to get inside the minds of what other people are doing. But what they were doing there was they were just blocking the race to where, okay, this is it. We're doing this. We're winning as much as we can. We're going to win 4 stages. He did the same thing on stage 7. And so I would liken that to like say LeBron James. He's staying in the 4th quarter in a 50-point blowout just so he can get a 40-point triple-double while still blocking all the shots of the other team. It's like there's a little bit of a chivalry that comes with cycling. And there's sort of like these unwritten rules. A lot of what we saw, and I know that I said, oh yeah, he's not making friends a bunch, and like if he has a crash or a flat, put the team on the front, and just I would never do that. I was being facetious. I was joking, but there's all these sort of unwritten rules. They're just sort of this thing that we do in cycling that we saw with Primož Roglič, how everyone waited for him. Shit. Did I lose you guys?
No, you're there. TJ, I hear you. And I think it's important to mention. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear
check.
you, but I lost the video connection. I don't see you anymore.
We're good. We can see you. So we'll just gonna keep rolling. I just won't make any faces at you.
All right.
So TJ, I think
edit this out.
It's important to recognize what one of the perspectives you're bringing here is you are in the team car, you are with the riders. So I think this is a valuable glimpse to the inside of what this dynamic of what the other teams, what the other riders are feeling. And it's helpful, I think, as viewers to get that little glimpse into that. But that said, like I'll I'm going to throw a little devil's advocate or push back a little bit. On one hand, you could argue, I think Tadej Pogacar and his team, they need to ride as hard as they can, take everything they can get, and go all in every chance they can get, because you got to also recognize that his competition level of him and his team at Volta Catalunya, that is not the level that they have to be at for the Tour de France, for the Giro d'Italia. So you could definitely make the argument. I think you can make the argument that they've trained as hard as they can. They've gone all in. They have full commitment, accountability from the team sponsors, the trainers, the performance group, the selection of the riders just to get into Pogacar's squad on that team. That's a competitive fight. Everyone on that team wants to be in at those races because they know there's a really good chance of winning. To do anything but take it all is a sort of a disservice to everyone that's investing, committing, and pouring it into that team. And I get what you're saying is like time will tell if it does sort of come back to haunt him. If there is this sentiment.
Brent. If he rides that way in the Giro, putting his team on the front all day, every day, trying to win as many stages,
he can't do it for Grand Tour.
That will come back to bite him in July.
But Catalonia's
doing a disservice, because I think what I think he needs to do is play off of other teams' tactics, get into their mind, see what they're going to do, and still win the race based on the work that they're going to put forth. And then also for the spectators, you see a better race. Sometimes you see a race where it's like, we get to see two races in one. We get to see a breakaway battle it out. And
these guys aren't here for the spectators, man. He's just an assassin.
Yeah, okay.
He just wants it all.
Fair enough. Now, look, Tadej Pogacar is probably going to go down as the greatest bike racer of all time. And let me just say this. I've never met Tadej Pogacar. I've done a couple of races with him, and it's not like I was never at a point to give him any sort of work. He was in another stratosphere. I was already on my way down, and even at my very best, like regardless, I've never spoken any words to Tadej Pogacar. Don't know him at all, but I do know Alan Piper very well. And I've known him since 2009. He was the reason I came to HTC. He was my director there. Then he joined me on BMC, and I have spoken with Alan Piper, and he speaks the world of Tadej Pogacar. I think the world of Alan Piper. So that's enough of an endorsement for me. Like, I think the world of Tadej Pogacar just by his extension to Alan Piper. So I am not. I don't want to make it sound like I'm not the biggest fan of Tadej Pogacar. And I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for him to win the Tour. I hope he wins it. I hope he goes down as the greatest rider of all time. And I think he has the chance to do it. I don't think winning 4 stages instead of 3 at the Vuelta Catalunya is going to vault him into the greatest of all time. I think there's still sort of that unwritten rule in cycling. Like, you wait for the leader's jersey if he has a crash. If it's not tactically relevant for you to do, you don't necessarily need to chase someone down. It's like, why would he pull in a sprint stage? Why would he pull if you have a rider a half an hour down? You can give him 20 minutes. Now, I'm not saying they would get 20 minutes. I don't think that breakaway would have won anyways. But what I'm saying is that other teams had interest. He could have played with them, and then they could have pulled it back, and he still would have won the stage anyways.
I got you.
I think he needs to get a little bit more of that tactical sense of, okay, I know that they're going to pull, so I can let my teammates have a rest. And then it also doesn't seem like we're being the big bad bullies of the bunch. I'm going to make another sporting analogy here, Brent. It's like if you're fencing, you know, like cycling, it has this chivalrous sort of thing. Like, you're fencing, you're sword fighting with someone. Hear me out. You know, like you're the superior sword fighter, and the other guy drops his sword, and you don't want to just like stick him when he drops his sword. You pick up the sword, you throw it back before you kill the guy. You know, like that's the sort of like chivalrous mentality that I feel like the tradition of cycling and its unwritten rules kind of has. That's why we wait for people if they are in the yellow jersey. That's why everyone waited for.
But Cannibals wait for no one. There's no chivalry for cannibals, and we're talking best ever. You got to talk about Eddie Merckx, who was the cannibal for good reason. I think, yeah, you could just argue that he's a cannibal. He's gonna eat him whenever he can. But I do agree, TJ. The perspective that you're bringing here is it's a good chance to get inside of the team cars and the peloton, because we don't know what we're going to see in May and June and July, but there's going to be moments when people at home are scratching our head like, what? Like, why isn't that happening? Or why is this happening? Why don't they wait for him? And then I think there's a chance, TJ, you're going to have your moment in the sun. We're going to come back and you're going to say, hey, remember that did come back to bite him a little bit, but yeah, we're not going to know. But I'm glad you're taking a stand on this. And we know. We know you love him, and you said it. You just said he's better than all them, man. You listed some all times. So yeah, putting Pogacar in that light, the respect is clear.
He's the best. He's the best I've ever seen. He's the best I've ever seen because of all the multitude of ways that he can win. He's not breaking any rules, so he has every right to ride however he wants to ride. I just like to see. The beauty of cycling is all the teams have their tactics, and how can you use someone else to your advantage? How do you get in the minds of other people? But to put your team on the front and just say like, no, we're riding everything back and this is just how it's going to be. Like that's taking away some of the essence of what makes cycling great. And that's just my opinion.
I hear you. Well, hopefully we'll hear and read some of the viewers and listeners chime in. So hit us in the comments, everyone. Let us know what you think. Let us know where you're at. Comments.
I want to know if you guys agree with me. I definitely want to know if you disagree with me. And pretty soon we're going to be having the greatest of all time debate, and Pogacar is going to be in it. Like, I think right now it's Merckx. I think most people would say Merckx, but I mean, Pogacar, like, you keep going the way you're going, you're going to be in that discussion.
No doubt. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a little longer to see Tadej Pogacar back in action. We have the other part of the big four, the other three, Remco, Roglic, and Vingegaard, also out. But that said, there's still a ton of exciting racing coming up this spring. We're going to transition now into the Ardennes coming up, Amstel Gold next weekend. That was a race I only did once in my career, but TJ, I know from your time living in Holland, you know that area well. I think, looking at the start list there, we can start hyping and talking about some favorites. I think you got to put Mathieu van der Poel is still on the top of that list, but you got to remember the roads of Amstel Gold it's not Flanders, it's not Roubaix. We'll see a different sort of swap of riders come in. We'll see some of these GC guys, more climbing center guys come in. I believe Matteo Jorgensen is going to be back in the mix. Brandon McNulty is going to be there. Mark Hirschi. So I think the name on everyone's headlines is still going to be Mathieu van der Poel as we go to Amstel Gold Race, TJ. But can anyone beat Van der Poel next weekend, or can he do it 3 weekends in a row?
I mean, if he's not too hungover from Paris-Roubaix and Flanders, then I don't think anyone's beating Mathieu van der Poel. I've already seen him win that race in 2019, and he won it like very convincingly. And he's far and away better now than he was then. He was just a young buck back then. If he shows up ready to rock and roll, I'm not putting my money on anyone else.
I'm right there with you. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we covered it else, unless you want to dig in any more Amstel Gold. What about, here's an interesting one, TJ. And I was just looking at the anticipated start list for Amstel Gold. We got Ben Healy, who is one of the riders that you work with. I think he's up there in the mix of the sort of outside contenders for Amstel Gold. Is this a race that we can expect to see Ben riding well in, and see what's his form like this year? And, it's in the team bus. I don't believe you're doing Amstel Gold. I think you're up next for Giro Trentino, or correct me if I'm wrong, but, or two of the Alps. But yeah, as you're trying to beat a juggernaut like Mathieu van der Poel and his Alpecin team, and you have a rider like Ben Healy, what do you do in a race like Amstel Gold? How do you approach that? And can Ben Healy be up there on the podium?
I mean, he was second place last year, and he has great form this year. He actually had an injury early on last year, and now he's come through the season totally healthy. So hopefully he's fresh and he's ready to go. He hasn't had any setbacks. So absolutely, Ben Healy for Education First should be a hot favorite up there. Yeah, sadly, we're going to be missing Nielsen Palace. He's still dealing with a bit of some knee stuff, but hopefully we get him back soon. But I think Ben Healy will hold down the fort for EF just fine.
Nice. All right. We'll be watching your EF team there. We'll be watching the other Americans. We got Brandon McNulty back on the start line, who's coming off a big win at the GP Miguel Indurain and a strong ride at the Basque Country. We'll tune in and watch next weekend. And until next time on Beyond the Podium, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time.
For all your cycling content year-round, subscribe to NBC Sports YouTube page. We got it all.